Around 6,000 asylum seekers have joined a caravan in Mexico headed to the United States. It's the largest convoy in over a year. It's all happened over the Christmas weekend. It comes as more than 35,000 migrants were apprehended at the border over that holiday weekend. It's just hard to believe. It's all happening as top US officials are going to be visiting Mexico City tomorrow. Let's bring in Sky News contributor Kosha Gada, who knows a lot about this sort of stuff. I mean, Kosha, the poll numbers out of the United States show that President Biden's immigration policy has failed. Does this trip to Mexico City signal that the Biden administration has finally woken up to the reality?
Great to be with you, Gary. I think it signals that the administration has woken up to the optics, maybe not the reality, because the poll numbers, as you mentioned, have been plummeting. This is an issue where 70% of Americans, based on the Real Clear Politics average poll of polls, disapproves of his handling of the border. And also in this day and age of social media that we live in, that imagery, such as you're playing right now, comes through everybody's phone feeds. We see it, and it's trickling through into everyday life of people, not just in the border states, but also north as they're getting bussed up and shipped up. So this is definitely at his doorstep. But the reason I say I don't think it's signaling waking up to reality is because reality would look like actually taking action and not visits and speeches. And I think that the time for that has long passed. Action would be fortifying the border, putting the military there, bringing back those policies that were previously in place, such as Remain in Mexico, tightening up the asylum racket and all the rest of it. If they want to do it, they can do it. It requires political will, and both parties for decades have not shown that they have it.
And you realise that with social media influencers doing live streaming as they're crossing the border, and people in America are rightly worried about just exactly who's coming and the terms under which they're coming. How important is this issue going to be in the 2024 election? Right up there, I'd reckon.
You would think so, because the fundamental role of government is keeping the homeland safe, and the border is, the definition of keeping the homeland safe. And in a normal cycle, you would think it would. The issue is, I think, gone are the days of a normal election cycle where issues and policies and the candidates actually matter. And we've moved into this era of systems-based elections, where it's all about who's better at navigating and wielding the system of turning out the vote, of navigating, mass mail-in balloting, which is now the norm in many states, of being able to leverage the judicial system and putting the whole weight of that against the leading candidate of the other side, as is happening right now. So people kind of who are very good, the party that's better at navigating, leveraging all of those tactics, which often seems to be the Democrat Party, they're just very savvy at that. You would think that even in the wake of this kind of an issue, they actually, might just pull it out again, as we see them doing again and again, even though the policies are very unpopular.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there, but I'd reckon in the normal election cycle, Joe Biden would probably look for a distraction. He's now ordering international airstrikes. It's some sort of a distraction for this border crisis. I was watching people crossing at Eagle Pass, Texas. There you go. It's not hard, is it? 6,000 in sort of one day. Extraordinary stuff. Look, while we're on the topic, what do you make of these repeated attacks on US troops from Iranian-backed groups that have triggered Biden's decision now to order these airstrikes?
Yeah, I think you're right that pointing to a foreign foe is a time-tested and trusty strategy for distracting away from poor performance domestically. So there's something in that for sure. I think it also reminds people of how in the wake of a weakened America, Iran is stronger and is emboldened, and some of the policies that this administration and the previous one did, the famous plane loads of cash and all that stuff went in there. Just you see that sort of coming home to roost a little bit. I think it also raises a bigger question that many Americans are increasingly asking, which is, why do we have so many bases and troops in that part of the world and elsewhere anyway, as there is a shift in the domestic appetite back home towards non-interventionalism and focusing more on the problems at home instead of being all over the world. I think these kinds of things where we've got our troops as sitting ducks in some of the worst corners of the world is something that I think my fellow Americans are certainly asking a lot more about.
I've always made the point, don't worry about the Americans showing up. It's when they don't come is a bigger problem. But look, let's talk about the election. You mentioned before that the judiciary, having them on side is critical. Let's look what's happened. Colorado Supreme Court has ruled that Donald Trump is ineligible for the ballot. Surely the people should decide. This decision reads that Well, you know, the secretary may not list Donald Trump's name on the 2024 presidential primary ballot, nor may she count any write-in votes cast for him. This is actually censorship. It's courtroom coup d'état.
It is, and the provision that they use is the 14th Amendment, which is a Civil War era amendment that was enacted to prevent people that actually staged an armed rebellion against the United States government in the Civil War from holding office in the future. So they dusted off this thing from the 1800s. He has not actually been convicted of that crime in any of the four cases that he's facing right now, and they just leapt to the verdict without actually having to go through the process. So most legal scholars are saying this is going to make its way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court should throw it out because there's no mechanism for a state to unilaterally come in and take a federal candidate off the ballot. But, you know, who knows? We're living by this, hanging by a thread over here where it's all boiling down to 9 justices at the Supreme Court, or 5 of them, really, of the 9, interpreting the law constitutionally and hoping that that sorts it out. The fact that it's come to that, I think, makes people very, very uneasy and very, very sad.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly sad. The land of the free and the home of the litigant, it seems to me. Now, Russia has confirmed one of its warships was damaged in a Ukrainian attack on a Crimean port in the Black Sea. This is as Moscow claims to have seized the key town of Marinka in eastern Ukraine. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
You know, I think this battlefield just continues, the battlefront, and you might see changes in either direction happen from day to day. But I think, you know, one view that many have held from the beginning is there is strategic asymmetry here when the West looks at our involvement in this versus Russia. And winning this war is much more important to Russia than defending Ukraine on the other side is to all the Western countries that are involved. That's just the reality of what it is. And so I think, you know, even if they have a setback here and there, the fact that this has not ended the way many people said it would have back in 2022, and it's still continuing, and these captures happen, I think it's telling us that it continues, and I think the world's eye is shifting away from that now into other conflicts, and Russia's going to continue to advance and do what it does.